If you're waiting for time to heal your obsession with someone who barely gave you anything, or someone you wanted a real connection with, but something always seemed to get in the way, I hate to say it, but time is not the thing that breaks that limerence spell. Limerence is like one of those episodes of the old Star Trek where people got stuck in the limbo of the transporter. You know those episodes, right? Limerence is that place. It's the in between, the nowhere. And I'm sorry if you've never enjoyed Star Trek, this is Nerd Corner. Just give me 10 seconds here. Limerence doesn't live in real time, it lives in fantasy. And the only thing that really breaks fantasy is the truth. That's it, nothing else. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk a lot about the hidden ways that complex trauma affects our emotions, our relationships to other people, and our decisions in general. And we do this so that we can finally take back control and live our lives on our own terms. Stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to walk you through what breaks the obsessive attachment of limerence and how to make this happen in your own life if you're still struggling. Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. Let's start with the thing that makes limerence so powerful. It just feels real. You're longing for this person and your obsession, the intensity of your feelings, none of it feels fake. And it's because you're not pretending, you're not imagining that you care about this person. You really do care about them and you care about them intensely. The unfortunate part is that most of what you're feeling isn't actually about the real person. It's about the fantasy version of them that your brain has built. That's why limerent objects take on this larger than life kind of energy. Because that's how you really see them. A lot of the time, they kind of hover over you with their incredibleness, right? And that part where we put the other person on a pedestal above us, that's so common in limerence. We elevate the other person, and from their magical kingly palace, they look down on us and they regale us with their very valuable attention. And it's not because you're doing something wrong. You're not manufacturing this whole experience out of nowhere. It's because this is exactly how the brain works when it's in a dysregulated and anxious and love-deprived state, which limerence is. So your very civilized and usually very sensible brain, right? The brain that can do math and file your taxes and organize your Google Calendar and give sage advice to your own friends. Yeah, that brain is now a donkey with a tasty carrot right in front of it here. That's what limerence does. It hijacks your intelligence and it turns it into someone chasing the idea of something, not the reality of what's actually there. Because the reality of what's actually there, it's not that great. That's why you become limerent in the first place. You only feel this way when the other person is inconsistent or mysterious or unavailable in some way, or when there are real barriers, whether they're real or emotional, that keep you from being with the other person, right? Because if you could be with them and they could be with you, this magical, overwhelming sensation, it would fade. Because limerence thrives on a good mystery. It thrives on all of the unanswered questions that are swirling around in your brain. And your brain, it does smart things. It fills in the blanks with fantasy, with potential, with the big capital P. It fills in everything that's missing with imagination. And the imagined version is usually way more powerful than the real relationship could ever be. Let's talk about the uncertainty piece of it and why limerence thrives in this uncertain place. Your brain is so good at imagining love, much better than it is at experiencing love in real life, because real love, when it's solid and reliable and stable, it often feels a little more tepid, right? There's not a lot of mystery, not a lot of sparkly uncertainty. And that's kind of the point. Real love should feel a little bit like lukewarm water, not because it's boring, but because no one can live a functional, productive life if love is always operating at the heights of feeling, right? Like scalding hot water. You can't work a full-time job or run errands and do grocery shopping and take care of yourself and your children all at the same time as you're trying to be in a relationship that feels like an emotional roller coaster 24/7. There's nothing romantic about that. It's completely unsustainable to your physical body. But your brain has so many magical references for love, right? From rom-coms and sitcoms and books someone read to you as a kid, from every dreamy, half-imagined love scene that you've ever absorbed into your subconscious mind. So when you come across a relationship dynamic that's unclear, that's unexplainable and mysterious and magically inconsistent, your brain dumps all of that beautiful content you've been saving into this great big void. It fills the gaps. And the fantasy it builds, it's often better than love could ever be in real life. So now, every time you don't know what the other person is thinking, because it's 5 p.m. and they're at home with their wife, or it's 7 a.m. and they're asleep in a different time zone across the world, or they only ever seem to call you Saturdays after 8 p.m., and that's somehow the only time they're mysteriously available. The rest of the time, your brain is busy building these fancy love castles in your mind. And every once in a while, when they throw you a crumb of attention, or you actually get to spend time with this real person, your brain says, "Thank you, I'll wait for the next carrot." And the less they interact with you, the fewer opportunities they have to ruin that awesome fantasy you've built up. So you just hold on tighter because, well, they seem quite perfect as long as they're not interacting too much to spoil it, right? In fact, they're even more perfect. But they're perfect only up here. That's the beauty and the tragedy of most episodes of Limerence. So what actually breaks this magical spell? Well, it's not time, and it's definitely not closure. You don't need more of that. And it's not some perfect goodbye letter that wraps everything up neatly. It's the truth. That's it. Plain, unflinching, boring truth. And I don't mean some big dramatized realization that wakes you up in the middle of the night. I mean just small, honest moments of naming reality exactly as it is. So for example, you say this: "She hasn't reached out in 2 weeks." Just say that out loud, not with a story or a hopeful tone, just the sentence, the facts, and then watch what your brain tries to do with that, because your brain will start spinning all kinds of stories. Maybe she hasn't texted me back because she doesn't want to bother me with boring small talk. Maybe she dropped her phone in a lake and hasn't had the money to buy another one. Poor thing. Your brain will come up with anything to avoid reality, because reality hurts, it sucks. And those love castles in your mind, they're a lot more pleasant than what's actually happening. Or maybe your limerent object says, "I'm just not ready for a relationship right now." And instead of taking that at face value, you turn it into, if I just wait long enough, if I keep showing them how amazing I am, they'll realize they're ready for love with me. But that's not what's happening. The vast majority of the time when someone says they're not ready for a relationship, they're not asking you to like perform magic tricks or juggle in front of them until they are. They're not leaving the door open most of the time. They're just saying that they're not ready for a relationship with you in this moment in time. It doesn't mean they'll be ready for a relationship with you tomorrow. And I know how much that sucks to hear. But that's the kind of truth that starts to clear that limerent fog, right? In limerence, we do anything to avoid these kinds of facts. But facts like these, they're not emotional insights or spiritual downloads of some sort. They're just plain facts. They haven't contacted you, or they said they're not ready, or they're dating someone else, or they simply don't reciprocate. And when you start naming the actual facts, the fantasy starts to lose power, because limerence doesn't feed on truth. It feeds on possibility, on what could happen, on what you hope happens. But truth says this is what's actually happening. Not what might happen, not what you're trying to manifest with your mind or your positive intention, just this. Like right now, this person hasn't contacted me in 2 weeks, let's say. Right now, they told me they're not ready. That's it. In fact, that's the whole point of facts. Facts are not nuanced, right? They're not up for interpretation. They just are. If someone hasn't contacted you in 2 weeks, that's a fact. And you can go on and build 100 stories around it to make that fact prettier, to make it smell better. But the fact does not change. It's simple and bare. And that's exactly what you need to be looking at. If you're still limerent right now, here's something I want you to try. If you're willing, say it out loud. Exactly what this person is showing you through their actions, not their words. Because remember, actions speak truth, words tell stories. And that's a big, big difference. So say the facts. They don't reach out unless I do first. They ignore me when I'm vulnerable or upset. They're married and they said they're not leaving their wife. They have the communication skills of a teenage monkey, which, by the way, is a deal breaker for all of humanity. Whatever the circumstances are that create the barriers in this limerent relationship, just say them out loud. You're not doing this to be mean, to punish this person. You're doing it because saying the truth out loud is what breaks the illusion. It pulls you, it sucks you out of the story, and it grounds you back into reality, right? It helps your brain start to separate them, who they actually are, what they're actually doing, from the fantasy version you've been carrying around in your mind. And your job now is to separate those two things as much as possible, to wrestle them apart if that's what you have to do. Because that's what actually fractures limerence. That's what dissolves the obsession for good in the end. When the person begins to stand alone outside the fantasy, only then can you see them for who they really are. And when the fantasy collapses, yeah, that's terrible grief. It's heartbreak. But it's also freedom. And freedom is worth a hell of a lot. What we tend to do in limerence, and why it drags on for so long, is we sabotage our own healing by protecting the fantasy we've built, right? We defend the other person's behavior. We say stuff like, they're just scared, or they need more time, or they've been through so much. They have childhood trauma. How could they do any better? And if we're really sensible and empathic, we say they're doing the best they can. They'll come around eventually. And sure, maybe they will. But if at this moment in time, your connection only exists inside of a nice, protective, soft bubble of what might be, then by default, it's not a relationship. It's a projection or a fantasy or a very compelling illusion that looks nice. And the longer you stay to protect that fantasy, the longer you stay stuck right inside of it. And I know that a lot of you don't want to demonize the other person, because sometimes they're not a bad person. They're just someone who can't have a relationship with you, or someone that you can't have a relationship with. And that doesn't make them bad or evil. So no, you don't have to burn the whole thing down. But you do need to be really honest. You have to stop calling a dream a relationship, because the two are not the same thing. You can't mistake your own obsession and focus on this person for actual connection. Real love has to eventually grow into something mutual and stable and grounded in reality, right? And it's impossible for love to get there when it's wrapped in so much mystery. Stable, good love, it grows in only clarity and reality between two people who are both present and they're both ready to build something real together. If you're still in the thick of it and you're still fantasizing about what could happen and still waiting for something to change so that this connection can finally work out, please know you don't need more time. You don't need to be a little bit stronger or wait a little bit longer. And you don't necessarily need to just get over it, because just get over it is not that simple. What you do need is to start exposing the truth in a really raw, honest way, even if it is painful. Even the small truths, that's how it starts. Because in the end, It's truth that sets you free. And once the spell breaks, once you look back and wonder how this ever had so much power over you, you'll see clearly that truth was the key out all along. If you enjoyed this video and you like this type of content, please consider subscribing so we can keep doing this together. I'll see you in the next one.